The local population threw him out, understanding that by having the Pope within the walls of the city, they would face the devastation and slaughter.
So they kicked him out? That is so bruh.
Eventually, Richard's army proved the decisive factor. Rudolph was unable to rally his forces as his flank broke down.
What?
This freed up cavalry to launch a charge against the Swabians.
No freaking way. Suggestion by my wonderful subscriber. He's been waiting long enough. Guys, sometimes you have to remind me. If I'm taking a bit too long, you have to remind me, because sometimes I lose your suggestion or I forget, okay? So always, sometimes just, you know, if you have a suggestion, just remind me.
Somewhere in southern Italy, Pope Leo IX anxiously overlooks a meadow from the city walls. In front of the gate, his coalition army of Italian, Lombardian, and Swabian soldiers had set up camp, fully intending to meet the Normans in battle. The Normans had been a welcome source of hired swords for local Lombardian and Italian lords, and their mercenary services were even retained by the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor. However, the Normans used their success on the battlefield to expand their territory and influence across southern Italy. Many of their former employers now saw them as a threat. As the papal standard flew above the formations of the coalition, a much smaller Norman army of grizzled veterans appeared on the horizon, commanded by the famous Hauteville brothers.
This is the first time I've seen a pope actually leading an army in battle, by the way. I've heard of Pope like having so much political power back in like the Middle Ages and whatnot. Bro, this is actually like the first time I'm seeing a Pope in like a real fight.
Reports that the Normans were malnourished due to lack of supplies,
gonna be interesting.
The coalition leadership was confident. The Pope smarted that Italy lacked its freedom because of these wicked men who pressed Apulia under their yoke, insisting that now was the time to expel them once and for all. But before we continue, I'd like to welcome back a returning sponsor,
Magellan TV. I already talked about Magellan TV. Magellan TV is okay. They're better than Curiosity Stream. I've tried both.
The early 11th century saw a steady stream of Normans arriving in southern Italy. Some say they came as pilgrims to worship the shrine of Saint Michael, the warrior saint, at Monte Gargano in Apulia. Others claim it more likely that Pope Benedict VIII invited the Normans to help keep the Byzantine Empire in check. Whatever the case, the warlike nature of the new arrivals was not lost on the local ruling elite, and the Normans quickly found themselves in demand as mercenaries by the squabbling petty Italo-Lombard kingdoms and dukedoms of Italy. Recruiting them alleviated some of the concerns posed by internal rivalries, but more importantly, these small kingdoms now had the ability to tackle the far greater threat posed by their powerful neighbors. The Holy Roman Empire to the north, the Byzantine Empire to the south, clinging on to their last territories on the peninsula, and the raiding pirates who operated from the ports of the Muslim-controlled Sicily. Simply put, the demand for premier mercenary troops was high.
Wait, the Caliphate expanded to Sicily? I did not know that.
At a rapid pace, while the Normans were all too happy to service anyone with enough coins on hand. And attracted by the exploits of their countrymen, more Normans arrived every year from France by both land and sea. Their timing was near perfect, during a period when the Byzantine influence in the region was on the decline, as more and more of their military units were moved to critical theaters of war elsewhere. The Lombard lords who rose to throw off the Byzantine yoke often turned to giving territory to the Normans in place of payment for their services. This policy was effective in the short term, especially for the local lords that were running low on money but needed mercenaries to achieve their objectives. However, in the long run, this worked against the Lombard nobility. Giving land in exchange for military services paved the way for Norman adventurers to carve out their own territory in southern Italy. And by the late 1040s, they had a secure foothold in southern Italy as 3 distinct fiefdoms formed. The county of Aversa was held by Richard Drango. He was the nephew of the prior ruler, Rainulf II, upon whose death he was appointed guardian of Rainulf's son and heir, a baby only a few months old.
Bro, what the heck?
But the infant boy mysteriously died only a year later.
Mysteriously.
Richard, now the last surviving member of the House of Drango.
Mysteriously. Is he saying that sarcastically?
Took over the fief. Drogo de Hauteville, commander of another prominent band of Norman mercenaries, exerted control over parts of Apulia from the Hauteville stronghold of Melfi on the slopes of the Apennines. He was the second son of Tancred, a minor Norman baron, and had arrived in Italy in 1035 with his eldest brother William and his younger brother Humphrey in search of fortune. When William died in 1046, Drogo succeeded him, and just a year later, for his service to none other than Henry III, the Holy Roman Emperor, he was bestowed the title of Duke and Master of all Italy and Count of all Normans of Apulia and Calabria. To Henry, it didn't matter that many of these territories were ruled by the emperor in Constantinople, as he sought to expand his own imperial influence in southern Italy at the expense of the Byzantines, and he banked on Drogo to do his bidding. Finally, Robert de Hauteville, the 6th son of Tancred, controlled parts of Calabria from his castle at San Marco Argentano, appointed to this position by his older brother Drogo.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Mount and Blade. Like, that's why I was laughing at the start. Or like earlier when because this whole thing is just making me think, this is kind of like how you would low-key like carve your own kingdom. Well, you can do this somewhat. I'm pretty sure you can like work under a lord, have fiefs, and then just rebel or just leave the kingdom, right? I'm pretty sure you can do that. That's why I was like, I was chuckling because I'm like, wait a minute, we got real life Mount & Blade Bannerlord here. No, don't get me wrong, obviously Mount & Blade Bannerlord is based off this time period, so the logic would obviously be the same.
Known for his cunning, Robert was a physically intimidating figure and a capable commander.
What was he, like 6
for
feet?
Inspiring his men. During his time in Calabria, he married well to a noble heiress, Albarada of Bonalbergo, and had received a dowry of 200 knights. Norman power in Italy was growing, but it hadn't gone unnoticed. In December 1048, the former bishop of Toul, Bruno von Egesheim-Dagsburg, made his way from Worms to Rome. He was selected to become the next pope by an assembly of German and Italian bishops. He also received approval from Henry, a subtle reminder of the sway that the Holy Roman Empire held over his appointment. Once in Rome, the red-haired German from Alsace was consecrated in early 1049, assuming the name Leo IX. The new pope was immediately met with a stream of appeals from across southern Italy that reported on the brutality of Norman rule. It was claimed that the Normans acted less as knights and more as bandits, enriching themselves by plundering and spreading terror among the population.
That's basically what they were.
He received an excellent education growing up, courtesy of his aristocratic origins. Leo IX was well versed in political matters, and the seriousness of the current situation was not lost on him. He understood that, to the north, the ever-looming Holy Roman Empire would remain an ally so long as the Pope respected the wishes of the Emperor. After all, it was the Holy Roman Emperor and the Roman delegates who approved his elevation to the position of Pope. Antagonizing them would be a disastrous political move. Worse, to the south, the powerful Norman warlords were expanding and would soon have the entire southern Italy in their grip.
You know what's insane to me? He talked about how the Pope was well educated due to his aristocratic origin, right? What about a commoner? Would a commoner be educated or not? Like, how would a commoner live in his time period when it comes to stuff like news? Like, would they even know like what in the world is going on? Because they couldn't read. They ain't know how to write, obviously. And news took a long time to reach them. So, like, wouldn't they like be like very, very behind on what in the world is going on in the world right now or back then? Like, imagine you're just a commoner. You see an army just pulling up in your village, starts pillaging it and raiding it, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Next thing you know, you found out that the kingdom that you just so happen to reside in has been at war for the past like 6 months. It just took that long for the army to approach your area. Like, I'm sure that has happened plenty of times. I don't know. But if anyone knows more detail on that, you are free to enlighten me in the comments.
In the middle, the Papal States and the very independence of the Church were under threat. To Leo, it was clear that he had to prevent the formation of a strong and aggressive Norman domain. The Pope's first move was to appeal to his cousin, Emperor Henry III, for military aid. But instead of sending troops, the Emperor commanded Leo to visit southern Italy and re-establish the freedom of the Church. On his way, the Pope heard tales of pillaged towns, stories of the plundered countryside. The Normans took food, crops, and plow animals, and punished anyone who resisted by burning their vines and olive trees. Some said that not even the churches and monasteries were safe from Norman looters. I mean, these guys used to be Vikings, right? Yeah, these guys used to be Vikings, bro. They still clearly carry on their old Viking ways. The meeting with Drogo, Leo asked that the pillaging of the countryside be stopped around Benevento, pointing out that the duchy was given to the church by Charlemagne some 2 centuries ago. Drogo understood that the fact that he was not visited by a papal delegation, but by the Pope himself, meant that this request actually came directly from Henry, the Holy Roman Emperor. Drogo didn't need much convincing to accept the demands, for it was Henry himself who made him Duke of Apulia and Calabria. The crafty Norman knew not to bite the hand that fed him. Not yet, at least.
Not yet, okay.
But while Drogo was the most powerful of the Norman lords, in practice some warbands did not recognize his authority. Worse, in August 1051, he was assassinated, possibly a victim of a Byzantine conspiracy, organized as part of their planned reconquest of Apulia.
Oh, wow.
After a brief interregnum, Drogo's younger brother, Humphrey de Hauteville, was chosen as his successor. A hot-tempered man bent on revenge for his brother's death, Humphrey escalated the violent Norman raids in Benevento. This unnerved the Pope, and he requested Henry's aid.
Okay, look, innocent until proven guilty, but the Romans assassinated your brother, and you're getting revenge by targeting people who didn't assassinate your brother. Make that make sense to me, please.
The emperor did not recognize the threat, but Leo was not left to fend for himself. Count of Winterthur, Adalbert II, supplied 700 Swabian infantry, famous for their two-handed swords. They were joined by more men sent by other German lords. Many Italian and Lombard lords pledged their support, understanding that siding with Leo was their best bet against the Normans, with groups of fighters sent by barons from Apulia, Gaeta, Campania, Molise, Abruzzo, and Latinum. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine IX also sided with Leo, aiming to consolidate his position in Apulia once the Normans were expelled. The Catapan of Italy, Argyrus, reached out to the Pope, informing him they had a mutual interest in the dispersing of the rowdy adventurers.
We saw headless bodies lying on the ground along with horses knocked down with their own knights. William of Apula.
The Pope and Argyrus agreed to join forces and march on the Normans. The papal army gathered at Benevento in the first week of June 1053. From there, Leo marshaled his 6,000 men towards the meeting point at Siponto on the Adriatic coast, where he was to wait the arrival of Argyrus's host. Humphrey learned of the two coalition armies approaching from different sides. If they were to link up, they would undoubtedly overwhelm the Normans. He had to intercept the papal host before the Byzantines arrived. Time was of the essence. Humphrey called on Robert and Richard to quickly muster whatever troops they could, and had recruited a handful of Slavic mercenaries. The rendezvous point was the stronghold of Troia. There, some 3,000 horsemen and 500 infantry met, and Humphrey led them north in search of the papal army. In June, the Pope's army, commanded by Rudolf of Benevento, reached the small village of Civitate and set up camp outside its walls. They fielded a force of around 6,000 soldiers, both cavalry and infantry. Scouts informed the Norman leadership of the papal army's whereabouts. Encamped close by beyond a small elevation, Humphrey and his fellow commanders realized that with 3,000 horsemen and 500 infantry, the odds were heavily stacked against them. To make matters worse, the Norman army was short on supplies, and many in their ranks suffered from malnourishment. Understanding the danger they faced due to attrition, and aware of the uneasiness the Norman warriors felt about taking up arms against a supreme pontiff, Humphrey's commanders sent an envoy to the Pope to request a truce, even proposing they would swear fealty to the Holy Father. But the papal commanders refused to open negotiations. They knew they had the upper hand over their enemies. Getting weaker the longer they waited, the Normans decided to take the initiative. They split their heavily outnumbered army into 3 divisions. 1,000 heavy cavalry, commanded by Richard of Aversia, held the right wing. 1,000 of Humphrey's footmen and archers manned the center. And Robert Guiscard's 1,000 cavalry, with roughly 500 Slavic infantry, held the left wing. Given how disadvantaged the Normans were, the papal leadership may have been surprised to see them deploying in front of Civitate. The Pope remained in the town itself, watching from the walls together with his bishops. His army deployed into 2 divisions. The heavy Swabian infantry held the right flank towards the center, deployed in a long, thin line. Behind them stood the lesser-trained German troops. The Italian and Lombard footmen and cavalry, commanded by Rudolf of Benevento, manned the left in a scattered, loose formation. Richard of Aversia opened the Battle of Civitate by charging against the Italian contingent. The Norman cavalry started at a slow trot, then gradually picked up speed, bearing down on the Italo-Lombard lines. As Richard's horsemen smashed into the opposing infantry, the papal vanguard nearly broke from the pure shock of the charge. In the second line, Rudolph of Benevento's men held their ground, standing firm in formation as savage fighting broke out on this sector of the field. During this time, the heavy Swabian right flank began their march towards the elevation. Despite their malnourishment and lack of numbers, the Normans soon appeared to have the upper hand in combat. As Rudolph's vanguard resisted hopelessly, his rear guard turned around and fled back to their encampments.
Wow.
These panicked soldiers fled the battlefield altogether.
What are the other men doing? What? What are these people doing? What are they
As the fight
doing?
continued, the Swabians advanced against the Norman centre, seizing the high ground. Humphrey's archers met them with an enfilade of arrows, while his infantry advanced. The hail of projectiles chipped away at the Swabian vanguard as the Norman infantry rushed forward. The shields and swords soon met in a bitter melee as the Humphrey's men tried to maneuver to outflank the enemy. The Swabians enjoyed a slight upper hand against Humphrey's men, but the combat remained relatively balanced until Robert's cavalry launched a massed attack against the unprotected Swabian right flank. The poorly equipped German troops held in the rear panicked and immediately fled upon Robert's arrival. This relieved much of the pressure against Humphrey and cemented the fate of the Swabians, who continued to hold out bravely despite the odds turning against them. Eventually, Richard's army proved the decisive factor. Rudolph was unable to rally his forces as his flank broke down.
What?
This freed up cavalry to launch a charge against the Swabians.
No freaking way.
The Norman horsemen stormed against the knights, who now were truly surrounded with no way out. The Swabians...
How the hell? Nah, he deserved to lose. You deserve to lose. You had all the advantage. These people even thought that they were about to lose, bro. Oh, no freaking way. No freaking way. No freaking way. Oh, this is probably one of the I don't even know, like dumbest battles, stupidest battle. I don't know. I don't even know.
Hopeless fight. They chose rather to die than to turn tail. Such was their bravery that they were far more formidable like this than when riding on horseback. William Apulia, about
that. No freaking. So when they decide to fight to the end, they're actually competent.
The Swabian.
What am I hearing?
There are no reliable sources about the casualty figures, although it is certain a massacre took place. If only for the fact the Swabians were lauded, both by friend and foe, for their courage and determination, often refusing to retreat, but preferring to die sword in hand. The Norman victory at the Battle of Civitate had far-reaching consequences. After a brief siege of the town, the Normans captured the Pope. In a likely record of events, the local population threw him out, understanding that by having the Pope within the walls of the city, they would face the devastation and slaughter.
So they kicked him out? That is so... bruh. Okay, yeah, I see why you told me that this shit was hilarious. I see why you told me this shit was hilarious, bro. Because the guy who recommended me this, he told me this shit was hilarious. Bro. Yeah, I see why now.
The Byzantine army learned of the papal defeat and decided not to continue their campaign. They disbanded the troops, with some of their soldiers remaining in Italy, while others sailed back to Greece. After 9 months of imprisonment at Benevento,
Oh my
Normans
gosh.
released the Pope, but not before he recognized the Norman conquests. The victory was monumental for Robert, who was elevated to leader of the Normans in southern Italy. It would take several more years, but in 1059 the Treaty of Melfi between the new Pope Nicholas II and the Normans formally recognized their power in southern Italy. Now, former enemies found the Norman soldiers a welcome asset once again. Their troops were sought after to cow the old guard of anti-reform Roman families and to prevent them from installing their own papal candidates. And so began an unlikely alliance between the idealistic, purist church leaders and the self-serving Norman adventurers. If you stayed around this
We're RPG final boss, bruh. There's no other way to describe that. Yo, if you're new to my channel, make sure you subscribe. If you have any suggestions that you know I would love to react to like this, comment it down below. Guys, we just reached 7 members. The Discord server has been created. If you're an active viewer of mine, it's only 99 cents a month, man. I highly recommend you join a membership. You would get so much perks, guys. I'm telling you, I'm going to be expanding membership perks as I get more members, guys. And we just got 7 members, so I just created the Discord server, so there's better communication and a whole lot of other future stuff. Okay, a wonderful video here. Check out my other reactions on my channel. I honestly can't really believe what the hell I watch. Honestly, I'm like processing everything that just happened to me. I'm just dumbfounded by it. But anyways, man, thank you for watching and goodbye.